Can you remind us how this issue of LGBTI inclusion fits in with the sort of broader Sustainable Development Goals agenda, or just sort of the UN's principles in general? Is this something that individual secretary generals have to sort of reiterate year after year, or is there a real stated position on these issues that the UN has taken and endorsed over a long period of time?
You know, the truth is that it's a battle that is constantly reiterated, and one of the issues that we face is that very often some country will push back to including sexual orientation and gender identity in the text. And for a long time I heard that argument, which was crazy, but I heard it, you know, when I was younger, that LGBTI people were not covered by the Declaration of Human Rights. And of course, it sounds ridiculous because the first word of the Declaration of Human Rights is saying that everybody is covered by this declaration. But the fact that sexual orientation and gender identity was never mentioned, people interpreted it as, well, LGBTI people are excluded. And so that's sometimes difficult because if you read the SDGs, there is no specific mention of sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, you know, if you talk about inclusive cities, if you talk about the right to development, if you talk about the right to education, if you talk about the right to health, the links with ensuring that LGBTI people are not criminalized, that LGBTI people are not discriminated in society, are very obvious. You know, I worked at the World Bank for 15 years before I started working for the High Commissioner on Human Rights. And I can tell you that every time I was faced by extreme poverty, there was a connected human rights violation. You know, very often when you talk about poor people throughout the world, whether it's Dalit people in India, Batwa people in the Congo, or Roma people in Europe, or LGBTI people throughout the world, what you find at the root is prejudice. And the human rights violation that result from it makes it impossible for them to benefit from all of our Sustainable Development Goals effort. And so if you do not tackle discrimination, what you do is that you're basically doing the contrary of what we're trying to achieve, which is that the one that has the privilege, right, the ones that are in position of power are benefiting from the effort, and the most marginalized community remains stuck in poverty, remains stuck with having no voice, no agency, no participation. And so ultimately, and you know, that's something that I was always very passionate at when I was at the bank, is that if you do not look at human rights violation, you do not solve the problem of shared prosperity. I do not see any difference, you know, on LGBTI issues with the other human rights issues we're facing.